traveling overseas right now. It is the end of May, and traveling overseas is still somewhat of a challenge. We left about 10 days ago, and it was kind of rough.
Travel is just ever evolving, and I mean every day you need to check to make sure you can get into that whatever country, that you can transfer through another country on your flight, what you need, if it's a PCR test, what's the other one?
Antigen test. Yeah, I mean, when we were flying here, we took the routing that would allow us to get to Croatia and Greece without any tests.
Right.
So we flew out of JFK and went through Istanbul on Turkish Airways. And as long as you are transferring in Istanbul, there's no test required. And we just went shooting into Zagreb.
However, the agent for Turkish and JFK said, oh, you guys need a PCR test. And we have fully vaccinated certificates, and that's all that's required for Croatia. So CJ politely told her, no,
she was
you're
wrong. Yeah, so coming to that point, you need to do your homework and your due diligence. Make sure that if you're transferring through places, like if we had transferred through Frankfurt, we would have needed a PCR test just to get to Croatia, right, which didn't require a test. It just required a vaccination. So you need to do your homework, and then I would recommend printing up everything. Mm-hmm. Croatia had a thing that you needed to have prepaid accommodations, and you needed proof of that. But
and
when we
exiting.
And of exiting, and when you got here, none of that was required. But we did fill out the pre-arrival information, and so maybe they had that on hand. But even the gate agent in JFK had a sheet that was probably over a month old, and when we nicely and politely told her, no, we don't.
You need that PCR test.
Yeah, because if we did, we would have had to pay $200 each and go to Terminal 4 in JFK and get one done instantly. But we told her that, no, that's not the case, and so she was nice enough to look it up on the computer as we stood there for check-in and realized, oh, how are you going as a tourist? Yeah, you're right, you don't need it. So at least if we had it printed up, which we didn't, we had it on our phones, but at least you could have handed it to them or highlighted it. Mm-hmm. So I think you need to be ready and not count on everybody knowing what's happening, because it's just every country is different.
And every day is different.
Yeah, and even if you go to Italy, you got different regions that are in different positions. And then even when we got to Zagreb, we handed over our CDC vaccination cards, and he didn't know what he was looking at. Not that we expected him to. I mean, this is just the beginning. Yeah. But he looked at the back of the card, which is reminders for your second shot, and saw only one reminder and said, hey, you've only had one shot. And I had to point to him through his little window. No, it's the front of the card, and here's shot 1, shot 2. So
just be prepared.
Yeah, be prepared. Don't get flustered. Just know what you're looking at and have your information with you. I think that another unnerving thing is that on the Turkish flight, there's not a requirement to be vaccinated. So you could be sitting next to somebody that's not vaccinated, but then they're most likely going to have a PCR test. So, you know, that's going to be the case there. But also, we were lucky enough to use miles in business class, and it didn't turn out, it was a little unnerving. The girl in front of us, one row in front of us, and pretty much got everybody in business class uncomfortable. Yeah, very nervous. She was shivering so bad and so cold that she had blankets wrapped up around her head. A bathrobe. I mean, she had layers on.
She was sick.
She was sleeping before, the flight was even getting ready to take off. In a full recline mode, she was coughing, violently coughing. And then the piece of resistance is she started puking into bags. And this is
the whole flight.
Well, this is before we took off. So before we took off, and then as soon as we took off, and eventually a doctor attended to her, gave her an IV drip, and settled her down. So it might have been something as simple as dehydration, but in this day and age, you want to see alarm bells going off in everybody's heads. Those poor people in front of them were turning around. People are like, what's going on here? Because as you know from any flight, the instructions are, if you're sick,
you cannot board.
Don't board. Don't even come to the airport. And whatever this person's problem was, they should never have been allowed on that Turkish Airways flight. So yeah, that was the start of our trip, and we were like, yeah. So we're 10 days into it,
and we feel good. So
yeah, we feel good. So maybe she just had a
bad day.
Bad day. We also want to just mention one other thing about points. We used points in our miles to fly, and in retrospect, that might not be such a good idea. I mean, I did hear of other people having problems. If you've got problems when you get over here, you just can't have an airline rebook you. You've got to call back to your where you had the miles, where it was originated. I'm not saying this right, but we would have had to call Life Miles in Colombia and try to get them to redo flights.
That would have been a mess.
Yeah, and that would have been a mess. It's really tough to get a hold of them, and wait times right now, whether it's our friends in Germany, they're calling Lufthansa to fix a mistake, had to wait an hour. It seems that wait times, no matter what you're doing with airlines right now, are long.
Super long, yeah.
So it can really be a hindrance. We heard somebody going through London Heathrow, missed a flight, and British Airways wouldn't help them, so they had to get a hold of American Airlines, Advantage, to try to redo that. So I don't know if it's great using miles. If it is, if you can get direct, like they're going to start flying nonstop from the U.S. into Dubrovnik.
Delta, right?
Delta, and I think some other American, maybe United. But then maybe use miles if you don't have any connecting flights, or if that's your final destination. And if you're flying with that airline, you're not using partner airlines. It might be better to do it that way. But yeah, we were lucky. But in retrospect, and from the stories we've heard, we're like, maybe you should just buy a cheap, simple ticket, and definitely have, I think, refundability and changes available.
For sure.
So just a global travel couple top tip, travel tip.
Yeah, travel tip.
Yeah. So if any of you are thinking of traveling,
we would like to hear where you're going and what your thoughts are if you're nervous.
and your experiences, just put them in the comments below, because it really helps to know if there's a certain place like London Heathrow that we would never want to travel through. I mean, we know that from experience years ago.
Yes.
Whether you start hearing 7-hour immigration lines just to get into their country, I mean, that kind of stuff really helps in these times. So yeah, if you guys are experiencing or thinking of traveling, put them in the comments below.
Please.
Yeah. We're not kidding.
Yeah.
You saw that black screen a few hours later. It is literally maybe 3 hours later after we're making our Is It Worth Traveling Now video.
And giving you all our 2 cents.
Tips.
Ooh.
Well, we just got bit in the behind on exactly what we told you about. Would you like this?
Oh, yes. Okay, so our next flight is in 2 days. So we're looking at our flights because we're going to fill out our entry form for Greece and fill up our flight. It's not there. It's been canceled.
They canceled the flight from Dubrovnik to Istanbul, Turkish Airways, and no notifications whatsoever.
Nothing. No rebooking.
No rebooking, and of course no notifications from either Turkish or Life Miles. And so exactly what we told you, we started the process. We got on our T-Mobile phones, which is 25 cents a minute, and we probably spent $25. Do you know what it's like watching a minute go by and you're on hold and just a quarter? A quarter doesn't mean much, but in that instance,
It adds up.
it hurt. And so we ended up calling, we first got on WhatsApp. We tried doing it the cheap way, and Messenger from Facebook and Instagram. Turkish Airways said, we can't help you. We even called them. They said, we can't help you. You got to call the company that issued the ticket.
Long story.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
So then we called Life Miles, but it wasn't really Life Miles, it was Avianca, and we were on hold for 50 minutes. And then, they couldn't help us, and then they sent us to Life Miles, and she couldn't help us, and Turkish said they wouldn't help us. It's because of this, and there's hardly any flights out of Dubrovnik. We're like stuck here, really. I mean, I guess we could jump in a car, but then you're crossing borders, so you can't do that, and that's a 16-hour drive to Athens. And how do we get out of here? Well, if you're lucky, Austrian Airlines isn't flying here. They won't book you a ticket. You can maybe get out on Croatian Airlines, but then you've got to go to Munich or Frankfurt. Now you need a PCR test, which you can't really get in Dubrovnik, not at the airport at least.
No.
So there's still Turkish Airways And since they just screwed us, you can only imagine that's the last thing we want to do is pay them for a ticket.
Yeah.
They're the only option. And unfortunately, we did prepaid
So much of this
for
trip.
places like Santorini and some of the islands.
Ferries, airplanes, oh my
Yeah.
god.
I mean, we could have got our money back on the airplane, but nothing else. So do we want to salvage this trip? Because we don't want to be stuck in Croatia. If we were staying here, no problem.
Right, we would have enjoyed, but
Yeah, so it turns out, are you ready? How much it's going to cost for us? How much it's going to cost for us to get to Athens? 2-day notice. And of course, there happens to be no economy seats left.
oh, what a coinky.
Yeah, what a quinky dink. So we're actually going to be sitting right across from ourselves on the award ticket.
From our original
Yeah, on a pay ticket. And it's going to be for both of us $2,200.
one way.
Yeah, one way. And the flight time is probably less than 4 hours. An hour and 50 minutes and then a 50-minute flight with a long layover. And so now that's what we got to do. It's the only way to salvage the trip. We can't do it any other way. So exactly what we told you in that previous clip, we got screwed by not, well, I mean, you're
I don't know.
You're limited. There's not much you can do. We should never have come to Croatia because once you get into Dubrovnik or Split, most of the airlines are not really servicing this. And Turkish Airways was supposed to service this area, and then they just decided to cancel the flight.
So let's see what happens with Delta and whoever else is flying New York to Dubrovnik. I want to see if they really start flying
Well,
when they say they're going to.
you'll be okay then because they'll cancel it, but you better not have any non-refundable accommodations because you'll be in trouble.
Well, that's the ironic thing, because remember we told you, you have to have paid in full accommodations to get into Croatia.
We were not making that previous little segment before this video
Oh, to set you up? No.
to set you up. We got set up.
Yeah.
I guess we jinxed ourselves. We already told you our first experience with Turkish, letting that vomiting person on the flight that's gasping for air. And now this. I can pretty much tell you Turkish will be out of our repertoire for airlines.
Yeah.
Star Alliance or not, they are gone. This is a pill that I just cannot swallow without the bitter taste.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay then.
You've been updated.
Yeah, there
Be
you go.
careful out there. Maybe want to hold off travel till 2022? Yeah, well, we may be going back to van life. Here we come. We're coming home.
Okay.
Storyteller? Any vans available?
Anybody?